It's the 2022 World Cup. It's the squad update for Iran. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and today we'll be updating Iran's squad for the 2022 World Cup. We have done a podcast on the groups, which took a close look at Iran's team, as well as a player mediacast, which went through each of the candidates for making the final squad. And there are also short versions of those. The player edition ended with a prediction of the starters, and we'll do the same thing here. But this mediacast is an addendum to that long, full version of the Players podcast. So we won't be repeating all of that information. We will be summarizing the key information and adding on to it here. It's not necessary to listen to that version, but the conclusions we draw here are both based on that information and explain it in more detail. So we do recommend the full player podcast, but if we have time, we are hoping to release a player version focused solely on the final squad, giving the bios of just those 26 players, or 25 in the case of Iran, who made it to the final squad. So the final squad has been released, and today we'll find out how accurate we were in our predictions. We're going to list the names of the candidates we considered and then announce who made the preliminary squad. There is one for Iran. They had a 30-player preliminary squad, and then the final squad. So as we guessed, most squads had a few surprises, players who didn't make it or new unexpected players who did. We'll go over those and summarize them again at the end or near the end. We'll also discuss whether the selections and games played since June 2022 have changed our thoughts on our predicted starters and the team's prospects. So here I am. I think I have a better shirt than I had for the full-length Iran podcast, because at least here I have their colors. And I bought this Iran shirt when I was in Tehran visiting. No, okay, that's a lie. I've never been to Tehran, and it's not an Iran shirt. I'm sorry, Iran fans. It's a Mexico shirt, just has the same colors that Iran has, and the same colors in the flag at least. And I apologize. I hope it's not an insult. But anyway, I'm working on my shirt collection. I will work on my shirt collection, I promise, and I want to get one from Iran. Anyway, this we'll have to do in the meantime. Let's move on with the podcast, and we begin with the formations that they've used over the last while. So we kind of go back to way back to the Asian Cup in 2019 for this. But actually, we'll focus our attention mostly on the game since June 2022. So one pattern we do notice in all of those games is a four-man backline. So two central defenders and two outside defenders. So that's been consistent through the various formations that they have. And it's not as varied as all that. Most of the time, it's five midfielders with two rows of midfielders. Maybe a 2 and a 3 or a 1 and a 4, but most of the time 5 midfielders and 1 forward. However, sometimes it's 2 forwards, and a couple of times they've used a 4-4-2 formation or a 4-3-3 formation. I might say that because they used a 4-3-3 formation in 2 of the friendlies, that maybe they're favoring that. But I kind of have the feeling that overall they favor a two-line 5-man midfield and 1 forward. But we'll have to see, because they only did that once in the friendlies there. And let me talk a little bit about those friendlies. The games were in June. They played Algeria. That was in Iran, and it was a 1-2 loss to Algeria. And then they played 2 games in September, both of them in Austria. One was against Uruguay, where they won 1-0, so that was a good sign. The other was against Senegal. They tied 1-1. And the last one, a bit odd, in Iran against Nicaragua, which was a 1-0 win. So the formations for those games were 4-3-3, for the first and third games, a 4-1-4-1, which they have used a few times in the World Cup qualifying round, and finally a 4-1-3-2. So they've never used that formation before, and that leads me nicely into saying that the November game was quite experimental. I'll come to that in a second, but first I should point out the new manager, Quiros. Well, not a new manager, because he had coached them in the past and kind of came back for his second stint coaching Iran, came back in September. So he had a lot to do with the Cup looming ahead and only 3 games to play. So he had a lot to do in the September games. For those games, he seemed to go with small variations, the kind of regular cast of characters, maybe moving them around the field a little bit, but no big changes there. Maybe he returned to some of the systems he employed in his first time as manager. Iranian fans may be kind of more familiar with what systems he used when he was in than I am. But the November game was very experimental, which actually surprised me because it was his last game before the World Cup. So I was kind of expecting to see, a close to starting squad to play in that game before the World Cup, not the experimental squad that he used. So not only an experimental formation, but a lot of the players, some of them which he didn't end up selecting, a lot of kind of unused players and players out of position and stuff like that. So I gotta say, I found it a little bit odd, but I'm not the manager, so it's not up to me, is it? Okay, well, the manager is, as we move on to the looking at the squad, the manager is Carlos Queiroz. So we won't go through the whole introduction that we did in the Full Player podcast. You can go back and check that if you want the full history. But long story short, he was their manager from 2011 to 2019, so for a long time there, and he took them through the World Cup 2014 and the 2015 Asian Cup, as well as the 2018 World Cup. So very familiar with the team there. In the meantime, a couple of managers came and went, and then he came back in early September 2022. So he was the manager for those September friendlies, and here he is. So we are going to see some changes because of that. And it's actually kind of a theme of this podcast, kind of trying to keep an eye out for the changes that we see under the new manager. So again, after the September games, I didn't see a lot of changes, and the November games kind of threw me for a loop. But anyway, there we have it. Carlos Queiroz, the manager, and we will say that he was selected for the final squad. Okay, well, the way we're going to do this is we'll go through the names first, and then we'll announce who was selected for the preliminary and final squad, and then we'll do a kind of a summary of the position with an eye especially to those friendly games. Although I gotta say, there's not a lot of point in talking about the November friendly, because I really don't see that as the starting team. So it'll mostly be the September games that we'll be focusing on. Okay, well, let's look at the goalkeepers. So we had as definite candidates Ali Reza Berenvand and Amir Abedzadeh as definite candidates, and then we had Hossein Hosseini and Payam Niazmand, both as possible candidates. And finally, we had Mohammad Reza Akbari as a possible but unlikely candidate. Well, I gotta say, all of them were chosen for the preliminary squad. So I'll highlight them in light blue if that's the case. Mohammad Reza Akbari, but I'm going to delay on highlighting the others because, to my surprise, 4 keepers were brought to the Cup, rather than most teams that have 3. So all of the others making the final squad: Ali Reza Berenvand and Abed Zeda, the Amir Abed Zeda, and also Hossein Hosseini, and maybe most surprisingly, Payam Niazmand making the final squad. So we had, even though we had him as a possible candidate, I thought he would be the one left off. Okay, well, let's summarize the position then. And mostly it was Berenvand since 2021, but Abedzeh came in for several games towards the end of World Cup qualifying. And then Abedzeh and Hosseini each played 1 friendly, and I'm including the June friendly here. And Berenvand played 2 of the friendlies, including the November friendly. So one of the few kind of candidates that I consider starters playing on that squad in November. So we'll talk about at the end where that leaves us in terms of our predictions for starters, but we won't deal with our thoughts on who are starters here. You can maybe think about it in your own mind and then compare with what we think at the end. Okay, moving on, we have central defenders. So we begin with Shoja Khalilzadeh as a definite candidate. He's the only definite candidate we have here. And, or we had, because these are based on the full-length podcast that we did before the September games. Likely candidates, we had Majid Hosseini and Hossein Kanani. And then possible candidates, now we have quite a few here. Possible candidates, Aref Agassi and Aref Golami and Farshad Faraji. All possible candidates, and I think I'll speed things up a bit here by saying that none of them made the squad, so we're going to eliminate them from the list here. And then possible but unlikely candidates, we had Armin Sorabian and Siavash Yazdani, but those 2 didn't make the squad either. And then we had, I think that was a mistake, retired. I think it should be, seems to be off the squad. Anyway, Morteza Puraleganji seemingly off the squad. And the last one, Pejman Montazeri, was kind of a retired candidate. And he is not on the squad. And we'll actually update an injury, a couple of injuries here. Anyway, Morteza Puraganji did make the squad, even though he was seems to be off the squad at the time we did the last podcast. And all of the others made it. So Shoja Khalilzadeh making the squad, Majid Hosseini and Hossein Kanani all making the squad. So that makes it 4 central defenders that they brought to the Cup, and a whole bunch who they didn't. Now, let's just update a couple of injuries, because they had a lot of injury concerns here. Khalilzadeh was out with a hernia from March to June, but he has recovered from that. So Iranian fans must have been worried about the defense and the number of injury concerns when we last did the podcast, but they're all recovered. Majid Hosseini had a calf problem that we had mentioned. That came to nothing. It only lasted a couple of weeks, so just happened to be around the time we did the podcast, or the mediacast, I'm trying to call them. And also Morteza Puraganji, I think actually when we did the podcast, I wasn't really sure what happened, and I was surprised that he had last appeared on the bench in June 2021. It turns out he had been out with a ruptured knee ligament from July 2021 to February 2022. So he was out for a long time, but he came back. Didn't come back that quickly, because I don't think we were aware of him when we did the last podcast, but now he is back and selected for the squad. So I'm sure Iranians will be happy to have him back. Okay, let us summarize the position. It was a bit confusing in the period from 2021 with a lot of players coming in and out, including out of position players. So a defensive midfielder, Nuraf Khan, and I think he's been recoded actually to a defender, a left defender though. And there was another player, Sarlak, I think, who played in defence in the November game. So a lot of confusion. On top of that, the injuries and poor Al Ganji's return and the new manager made it that much more complex. So we were hoping the September friendlies would help clarify things here, but they didn't, with a different pairing every time. And across the 3 or maybe even 4 games, Hosseini was the only one to appear twice. So that's going to make our choice of a starter quite difficult, but that's going to come at the end of the podcast when we talk about that. So let's move on to left backs. And we have 2 likely candidates. Ehsan Hajisafi, well, he's labelled as a left back, but in fact he plays all over the field and only sometimes played as a left back, more like a left midfielder. But as I say, kind of all over the field. And Milad Mohammadi, also a likely candidate. Possible but unlikely candidates were Abul Fazl Jalali and Jafar Salmani. Now, and I've also moved a player. I've moved a player over here, and it was the player I just talked about as a central defender. And actually, he, I think we had him coded as a definite, which actually, as I'm telling you here, surprises me. It's Omid Nuraf Khan. Omid Nuraf Khan. So we've, as I said, his designation on my main source has changed to a left defender. We did have him as a defensive midfielder, and he did play in central defence and in left defence during this period, and I think only once as a defensive or central midfielder. So Omid Nuraf Khan. And the reason we had him as a definite was he started 8 of their 16 games, including the last 6 up until June, and he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1. So we thought he would be a definite candidate, but how wrong we were. He made the preliminary squad, but he did not make the final cut. So that was a bit of a surprise. Okay, but our 2 likely candidates, Ehsan Hajisafi is going to the World Cup, as is Milad Mohammadi, both of them selected for the final squad. And then one of our possible but unlikely candidates, Abul Fazl Jalili, was selected for the final squad, but Jafar Salmani was not, so we'll eliminate him from the list here. But we had Abul Fazl Jalili as a possible but unlikely. I think I'm repeating myself there, so I'll just go straight to the summary of the positions. So the position was mostly shared among 3 of these players, Mohammadi, Hajisafi, and Nuraf Khan, with no particular pattern. We noted towards the end that Mohammadi seemed increasingly out of the picture, while Jalali played 2 of the 3 friendlies at the end, with Hajisafi playing the other. So once again, we'll talk about who among that kind of messy description, who we think emerges as the starting left back there, but that discussion coming at the end. Let's move on to right backs. And we have a definite candidate in Sadegh Morahami, and a likely candidate in Saleh Hardani, and a possible candidate in Daniel Esmailifar, and possible but unlikely candidate Mehdi Shiri. And again, I'm not sure if this was is truly retired or off the squad, but we had 2 players who at least were seemingly off the squad, and Ramin Rezain was one of those, and the other was Voria Gafuri. I'm pretty sure he is retired. Well, we know that, Voria Gafuri is off the squad. We know that Ramin Rezaeian is not off the squad because he was selected, believe it or not, by the manager. And let's go back to the top. And Sadegh Morahami was selected for the final squad. But surprisingly, because we had him as a likely candidate, Saleh Hordani was not selected. So we're going to mark him in red here because that came as a bit of a surprise to us. And I wonder if the manager kind of recalled Rezaeian in from the cold. Rezaeian had not played since the November 2019. So quite a while ago. If the manager was perhaps favoured him and kind of replaced Hordani with him, that's what I'm guessing kind of happened there. Anyway, Daniel S. Malafar was not selected, so we can remove him. And Mehdi Shiri also not selected. So just those two there, Moharami and Rezaeian, going to the World Cup. Okay, we move on to midfielders, and we have quite a few defensive and central midfielders. So let's begin with the ones coded as defensive midfielders. And Saeed Ezzatullahi, a definite candidate. And we moved Omid Nouraf Khan from defensive midfielder to left back there, left defense. So we'll remove him from this list here, but he did make the squad. And we have Milad Sarlak, who I mentioned. He's a defensive midfielder, but in the November game played in central defense. And Omid Ibrahimi as a possible candidate. Sarlak, by the way, we had as a likely candidate. And we also have a new candidate here. And the new candidate is Rouzbeh Cheshmi. Rouzbeh Cheshmi. So I've already highlighted him in green because he was added to the squad. We didn't cover him in the previous podcast, and I'll tell you why. He had been off the team for about 3.5 years before he was called up in November in 2022 for their last friendly there. So he had been on the team. He's actually been on Iran since 2017 and has 18 caps and 1 goal and is 28 years old. And he plays for Istiklal in Iran. That's his second time with that club since 2021 in his second stint. Sorry, I just had to clear my throat there, and I have to do it again. Okay, sorry, Rouzbeh Cheshmi. So he's actually been in some tournaments too. He was a starter in the 2018 World Cup. Started and finished game 1, but he suffered a muscle injury in training, which ended his tournament. He was also called up to the Asian Cup in 2019, but there he was just a substitute. And then, as I said, pretty much since that time, after the 2019 Asian Cup, was off the team and then just made his way back at the very end. So again, perhaps a player that the manager liked and brought back in from the cold. Rouzbeh Cheshmi. So let's go through the candidates again, because I haven't told you which ones made it yet. So Saeed Ezzatullahi, the definite candidate, was selected for the squad. But again, we're surprised because one of our likely candidates did not make it, despite playing in that November game. Milad Sarlak, selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut here. And also Omid Ibrahimi, he was selected for the preliminary squad, but it wasn't so much that he didn't make the final cut. It was that he recently, very recently, after November 10th, picked up a groin injury, and he is expected to recover from that in January 2023. So that rules him out of the cup. So we had him as a possible candidate, so it's hard to say if he would have been chosen. I did read one article that kind of expressed a bit of, regret. Oh no, we've lost Ibrahimi, which would suggest that he was going to be selected, and he was on the preliminary squad. But whether he would have made the final squad, being fit, we're not too sure. Before summarizing the position, we'll move on and do the central midfielders. So we have Ahmad Nurullahi as a definite candidate. And then we have possible candidates Kamal Kamyabinya and Mehdi Medipur. And we have possible but unlikely candidate Yasin Salmani. And finally, retired candidate Ashkan Dejaga. A bit of a loss there. He was a real veteran. He was the captain of the team, but retired. And so Ashkan Dejaga is gone, so we'll erase him from the list. And none of these candidates beyond Ahmad Nurullahi made it. So we'll highlight Nurullahi in green for those who are following the YouTube, where you can see the visuals. I'm trying to say things so that we're not relying on the visuals for our podcasting audience, our audio audience. Anyway, Kamal Kamyabinya not selected, and nor was Medipur. So just Ahmad Nurullahi, and Yasin Salmani, the possible but unlikely candidate, not making it. However, we do have a new candidate, or another player who's kind of been recalled to the squad to be descriptive about it. Ali Karimi, selected again, kind of one of the selections from out of the blue, and he has been on the team before. I'll introduce him because we didn't cover him in the podcast. We had thought him off the squad. He last appeared for the national team in November 2020. So that's why we didn't include him in the list. Nevertheless, unexpectedly named to the preliminary and then the final squad. So here we have him. He's been on the team, Ali Karimi, since 2016 and has 13 caps and is 28 years old. And he plays for Kayserispor in Turkey since 2021. He actually played in Qatar as well, Qatar, where the World Cup is going to be held. He was there in 2021. And also played for Dinamo Zagreb in 2016-17. So he returned to Iran after that, but has played abroad a couple of times. In terms of tournaments, though, he never made it to a tournament. So in the 2018 World Cup, he made the preliminary squad, but not the final cut there. And same thing in Asian Cup 2019, made the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. So I suppose he was thinking, he's always close, but never quite there, and was drifting away from the squad. And lo and behold, the manager gives him a phone call and brings him up to the squad. So good for Ali Karimi there. All right, so let's summarize the positions of defensive and central midfielders. So in the last round of World Cup qualifying, Nurullahi and Eza Tolahi emerged as the main players in the central midfield. When it was just one of them, Eza Tolahi was usually the one. And when it was two of them, Nurullahi was often his partner. But sometimes it was three central midfielders, and that becomes very confusing because the third central midfielder, or maybe if either Eza Tolahi or Nurullahi was replaced, that came from a pool of around 5 different players. So it would be hard to kind of summarize in a simple way. But I will say that most of them were not defensive or central midfielders. Most of them were wingers or attackers kind of coming into the position. So we will meet those candidates, and I'll kind of mention the ones who played in central midfield. All right, let's move on to left midfielders. And we had some shifting around to do here because we kind of revised the way we view the positions on the field. So after doing, or through the process of doing all the podcasts for the full length podcast for the teams, we began to see more and more the left midfielders and right midfielders as kind of more defensive roles, more like kind of central midfielders who are on the right or on the left. And so we're going to reclassify some of these. Mehdi Taremi, well, he's not, none of these are defensive players. That's why we're moving them up. So actually, we're going to put him as a left winger, although during this period, he played more as a forward than as a left midfielder, but he has played as a left midfielder, as a left winger before. So we're going to put him there. That leaves us with no players who are actually kind of defensive left midfielders. On the right, we're going to do the same thing. Ali Reza Jahanbakhsh is not a defensive player, so we're going to move him to right wingers. And I got to say that my sources, I see that some of my sources are doing the same thing, kind of reclassifying these players. Not necessarily the way I am here, because, anyway, doing it because the position that they're labeled under doesn't really describe what they do. So right midfielder, also likely candidate Mehdi Taremi. We're going to move him to, is that left or right? Left winger 2. So we'll just put him there, and we'll talk to him. We'll talk about him in a moment when we finish with the defensive end of the field. So now we have no candidates as left or right midfielders. However, they do use the position in, well, quite often actually in their formations. We're really kind of thinking of a 3-man midfield, or it could be a 5-man midfield with 2 wingers there. And but the position of left midfielders was covered in our discussion of defensive and central midfielders. So Noura Hali is on the left of the central midfield about half the time, but then other players like the versatile Haji Safi or Vahid Amiri may also pop up here. So we had... Yes, okay. And then on the right side, again, this too was covered in our discussion of defensive and central midfielders. But unlike the left side, there's no real candidate here that we can say plays the position often. We do have Godos and Golizade, who will meet soon, sometimes covering the position, but really there was a wide variety of players, both on the right and left midfield, kind of covering that position. So I hope that's not too confusing. It was confusing for me, and I tried to sort it out in a simple way to present here, but it seemed like it seems like no matter how much you try to simplify it, it's pretty complex. All right, well, we'll kind of move to the forwards, because I'm going to, for Iran, I'm going to consider the left wingers as part of the forward line. And the reason is that for that is because the left wingers and the left attacking midfielders are often the same players. So there are no kind of right backs moving up to the left wing as there are on some other teams for Iran. Rather, it's kind of more attacking players playing on the left wing, and a lot of times they, in a different formation, will play as left attacking midfielder. And honestly, from time to time in a 4-3-3, they may appear as the left forward, and the same thing is true on the right side. Okay, so I'll stop yapping about it and get back to the players. So we have as a definite candidate Mehdi Taremi, although in this period he's played more as a forward. And we also have a likely candidate Mehdi Taremi. And we have Mehdi Gaedi, also, and he was a possible candidate, and then seemingly off the squad, Mohamed Mohebi. So those last two candidates, Mehdi Gaedi, didn't make the squad, and nor did Mohamed Mohebi. However, well, no surprise, because he's probably their biggest player. Mehdi Taremi did make the squad, and Mehdi Taremi also selected for the final squad. Okay, and let's move on now to the right side of the pitch. Oh no, I got to summarize the left side here. So, as we say, often the same players who play left wing and left attacking midfielder, so we combine them. But Iran's complexities begin to show here by the fact that neither of these players, Taremi or Tarabi, played that much. I think Tarabi might have in the November game played as a left attacking midfielder or left forward. But basically, Mehdi and Tarabi, Taremi and Tarabi were not the left wingers. Instead, it was kind of the versatile attacking Vahid Arimi. Oh my God, I'm losing my tongue. Vahid Amiri, or the right winger Jahan Bakesh, playing on the left side. So this changed in the friendlies. And perhaps under the new manager, with a different player there every time. So in the friendlies, Taremi and Tarabi both played, as well as Ansi Farad both played. So maybe changing under the manager, I'm going to make that point a little bit later, but Amiri and Jahan Bakesh for most of World Cup qualifying, and then changes in the friendlies at the end. Okay, let's move on to right wingers and right attacking midfielders. So same situation on this side. And this is where we find Ali Reza Jahan Bakesh, and he is a definite candidate over here, as is Ali Golizadeh. So both of those definite candidates. We also have possible but unlikely. So we move right down to possible but unlikely. Shurush Rafe. And we have two players who seem to be off the squad. Merdad Mohammadi and Siamak Nemati. Both of those not making the squad. And also Shurush Rafe. The possible but unlikely candidate not making the squad, so no surprises there. And the first two candidates we mentioned are Jahan Bakesh and Ali Golizadeh. And I've just realized with a bit of embarrassment that Mehdi Taremi is a right winger, not a left winger. So I should have dealt with him. Sorry, Mehdi Tarabi. I should have dealt with him over here. So anyway, there we have it. So I'll summarize. Ali Reza Jahan Bakesh and Ali Golizadeh and Mehdi Tarabi. It doesn't matter so much with Mehdi Tarabi because he didn't really start any of their games except, I think, for that November friendly. So we don't need to talk about him in terms of where he is positioned on the field. So that's my justification for my mistake, coding him as a left winger rather than a right winger. And by gum, I'm going to stick with that, no matter how much I'm blamed. Okay, let's summarize the position. And we saw that Jahan Bakesh started the first few games of World Cup qualification on the left side. On the left side, yes. Not the first few games of qualification. He started on the right side in World Cup qualification. Then he moved over to the left. Under the new manager, or maybe even shortly before in the game in June, he came back to the right side. And my sense is that the new manager seems to prefer him as a right winger. In between, Golizadeh was regularly in the position. So basically, when Jahan Bakesh was over on the left side, Golizadeh was here on the right side, and he also played one friendly there. Which is kind of suggestive that they're now kind of sharing the spot. Golizadeh was also sometimes playing more like a right central midfielder as well. Okay, let us go on to attacking midfielders, and we have a definite candidate in Vahid Amiri, and a likely candidate in Saman Ghoddos. And we have a possible candidate in Amir Hossein Zadeh, and a retired candidate, a real veteran, Masood Shoje. And well, at the time we listed Vahid Amiri as injured, so I'll update on that. But let's first of all talk about who made the squad. Well, another player who was the captain of Iran, Masood Shoje, they lose to retirement. He played last in November 2019, so he won't be part of the picture here. And the possible candidate, Amir Hossein Zadeh, not selected, so we'll remove him from the list. But the other two candidates, Vahid Amiri was selected, and Saman Ghoddos also selected. So we'll update Vahid Amiri because we had him as injured, and it seemed a fairly serious injury, a lumbar vertebrae fracture. So that's a fracture in his spinal cord, basically. So that sounded quite serious, and we really wondered whether he was going to make the cup. But this back problem went through March and through June and lasted all the way into September. So it seems like it was fairly serious. However, after September, he was playing back with his club, Persepolis, there in Iran. And I'm sure Iranians will be happy to have this versatile player back. He's coded as an attacking midfielder, but we've seen him play kind of as a left attacking midfielder. He also plays at the back in defense on the left, and I have seen him also sometimes play centrally and on the right side. So a really versatile player, and making the squad, overcoming his injury. Saman Ghoddos also making the squad, and he's another player who was also seen in the kind of right central midfield role as well. He didn't get a lot of starts. But usually it was as a right attacking midfielder, a right central midfielder. Okay, well, we move on to the forwards, and we have Sardar Azmoun as a definite candidate, or I should say had, because once again, this list was created during the Full Player podcast. We have Kareem Ansarifard. Kareem Ansarifard as a likely candidate. And then we have two possible candidates in Kaveh Reze and Alayar Sayed Manesh. Both possible candidates, and then two possible but unlikely in Ali Alipur and Shahab Zahedi. And we are going to erase those from the list here. So Ali Alipur and Shahab Zahedi not making the squad. I'll just make a quick note that Sayed Manesh there, Alayar Sayed Manesh, got a hamstring injury, and that was around from the middle to the end of August, somewhere in there, and his return date is unknown. So we did have him as a possible candidate, but it looks like, well, I'm not sure whether the injury is the reason he was not selected, but regardless, he was not selected. And finally, Kaveh Reza, kind of in the same situation. He was injured for the last three matches in, I believe it was March to June, with a fractured fibula, so a fractured bone, and he was also an injury out. And once again, we're not sure if that was the reason he wasn't selected, whether that injury is kind of ongoing and prevented his participation. But we do think, yeah, but anyway, he wasn't selected. That's the long and short of it. Okay. So Sorry, let's go back to the players at the top. And Sardar Azmoun was selected for the squad, but terrible news there. He picked up an injury, which I'll talk about soon. And then the super sub, Kareem Ansari Fard, also making the squad. Okay, let's talk about Sardar Azmoun, because I'm sure he is at the top of the minds of Iranians. He suffered a torn muscle fiber in early October, and that continued on. He wasn't able to play the November game. The return date is unknown, and it's said to be a 6 to 8 week injury. So if you think about it, 6 weeks would put him in the middle of November, right about now. 8 weeks would probably cause him to miss the first game or even the first 2 games. So he's such an important player anyway that I'm not surprised at all that they named him to the squad. It's just what role that injury will play. Will it prevent him from playing the first game? Will it prevent him from playing at all? That's really tough to say. So a big shock there for Iranian fans, and I'm sure they'll be keeping a close eye on that one. Sardar Azmoun. And, think also when you think of forwards of Mehdi Taremi, because that's the position he's been playing over this period. All right. Well, we also have one candidate that I should mention, Saman Fala, and he was actually a new candidate brought in, but just to the preliminary squad. He didn't make the final cut. So Saman Fala close, but not quite there. All right, let's move on to some statistics. So we did some statistics during the full-length podcast. They were based on kind of all the candidates, I think the likely, definite, and possible candidates. But these ones are just based on the 20, I was going to say 26, but it's actually 25 for Iran. They only brought 25 players to the tournament. And we begin with the average age, and Iran is, very old, 28.9 years old. So we've been saying 27 is kind of old, but we have been noticing that for this World Cup, the squads tend to be a little bit older, but not as old as this. The average is 26.7, and then we consider something like 27.3 or something kind of old. So we have Brazil at 27.4, Australia at 27.5. Those are kind of the older squads coming to the Cup, but Iran beats them by a year and a half, 28.9. So that is quite surprising. But more interesting if we analyze it, they only have 2 players that are 33 years old or older. And really what's causing the average age to be high is that they have no players who are 22 years old or younger. So most squads have, around 6 players or so that are 22 years old or younger. But I'll put up the little chart I have here, and we'll see that it's really a narrow range for Iran. All of the players. Oh, sorry, they do have a couple of players who are 2 players who are 33 or older, but a pretty narrow range, all the way from 24 years old to 34 years old. All of their players are in that range. And then the lower end, they have 1 player who's 24, and then the next oldest player is 26 years old. So you can see why the average age is so high on the squad. And I suppose they'll have to do something about that when it comes to rebuilding the squad after the Cup. But I don't see a particular problem with the age of the squad bringing that level of maturity to the Cup. I think it'll be an advantage to them. And certainly it is an advantage in terms of experience, because the average caps is 39.2. And that's among the highest that I've seen. The average is 32.9. And we have a couple of teams who have more caps, but definitely one of the most mature and experienced teams coming to the Cup. I'll just put a little list of average caps and look at the look at the overall picture here. So, oops, we have Hajisafi Ehsan Hajisafi with 121 caps. He has the most. Ansari Fard has 94, and then we take a big drop to Vahid Amiri at 68 caps. So a lot of experience there. I would say about half the team with more than 30 caps, and then only 3 players with less than 10 caps, 2 of them are goalkeepers. So a very experienced team coming to the squad here. Let's move on to their scoring. Total goals is 148, and total goals per cap 15.1. Those numbers don't make much sense by themselves, so only in comparison to other teams. So basically, the average goals per cap is 12.6. So Iran is quite a bit above that at 15.1. Again, one of the highest scoring teams that we have here. Now, in fairness, we should say that they played some pretty weak teams in the first round of World Cup qualifying. So they were scoring, I think it was 24 goals over 2 games against Cambodia, I think it was. So that kind of skews the average. And it'll be a different story against the kind of teams they meet in the Cup. But on the whole, a fairly good scoring average. And let's look at just a couple of their scorers to see who we expect to get the goals. And we have Ansari Fard with the most goals, 29 goals over 94 games. And that is a 31% scoring ratio, so 1 goal every 3 games. He's kind of their super sub. He doesn't start much. He kind of comes on later, which makes that scoring record even more impressive. Most of them are scored, late in the game, basically. Mehdi Taremi, though, is the player that they're going to rely on for goals. 28 caps and 60 goals, and that's a 46% average. That's very good for a forward. However, after that, it drops off quite a bit. So Ali Golizadeh and Alireza Jahanbakhsh are both around 20, a little above 20%. So those will probably be the players they would look for to score their goals. And actually, got to say, other than Mehdi Taremi and Karim Ansari Fard, who's a sub. Hey, wait a minute. Where is Azmoun Sardar? That's the player I'm looking for. I think something went wrong with my list there, so I'll just check my other thing here. And sorry, I don't have Sardar Azmoun. Let me see if I can kind of throw him in at the top here. 65. No, that's not right. 41 goals in 65 caps is what it is. So his percentage is 63%. I thought something was missing there. 63%. So he would be the player they are most reliant on for goals, and Mehdi Taremi, the other, and then a couple of the others chip in well. Sorry about that mistake, but let's move on to some summaries. So we'll begin with notable non-selections. We'll just summarize these things, most of which we talked about above. So notable non-selections are defensive midfielder, but we changed him to left back, Omid Nouraf Khan. We considered him a definite candidate, but he did not make the final squad. So some of this may come down to a new manager coming in. Salah Hardani, the right back, who we considered likely, was not selected for the squad. And also Milad Sarlak, the defensive midfielder, who we considered likely, also not making the squad. And I have one more to add, and that is one extra player. What do I mean by that? What I mean is Iran is only bringing 25 of the 26 allowable players to the tournament. So he could have added one more player to the list. but decided to go with 25. Let's look at some surprise inclusions. And we have Payam Niazman, a surprise in that he is a fourth goalkeeper, especially given that they are bringing 25 rather than 26. It also seems a bit wasteful to bring a fourth goalkeeper to the tournament. So I'm not really sure what's happening there. I'm sure he has a reason, so I shouldn't question it. Anyway, another surprise, probably not to Iranian fans though, Morteza Pouraliganji coming back to the squad. But to those of us from the outside, we saw that he had last appeared in June 2021. So when he came back in, it was a bit of a surprise to us. But I did have an Iranian student who I talked to who wasn't surprised by that at all. So I think it's just kind of from the outside, it looks surprising. Abu Fazl Jalili, the left back that was added, we had put him as a possible but unlikely candidate, but he did make the squad. And again, Ramin Rezain, maybe chosen over Saled Hardani. We speculated that maybe he had a bit of a relationship with the manager from when Queiroz managed in the past, and kind of renewing that relationship with a few of the players he coached back then and bringing them back into the squad. We have a few new candidates too. This is actually kind of bringing back a player as well, but Rouzbeh Chesmi. But by new players, it means that we hadn't considered them in the full-length podcast during the summer, and they kind of are coming back from a long-term absence, longer than Pouraliganji. The other one is Ali Karimi. We thought he was off the squad also, and he made a comeback here. He's only 28 years old, so age-wise, it's not a surprise. Same with Cheshmi at 29 years old, just that they hadn't played for the squad for a while, for quite a while. Okay, updates on injuries. So we'll begin with those who have recovered from injury. So Shoja Khalilzadeh, he had a hernia from March to June, but he is over it now. And also another central defender, Majid Hosseini, had a calf problem, but it turned out to be a short-term problem. We also had Vahid Amiri. They're definitely glad to get him back. He looked like he had some serious back problems that lasted from March to September, but he is back, and that's great. However, we do have one injury doubt, but the player is still on the roster. So that's Sardar Azmoun. That's going to be touch and go. We'll be keeping a close eye on that for the definite candidate and top scorer, Sardar Azmoun. So they'll be desperately hoping that his recovery goes quickly. Excuse me. We do have one player who was dropped due to injury. We think, we're not sure, he might have not been selected anyway because he was just a possible candidate. But Omid Ibrahimi, it seemed like his injury, well, at least it ruined any chances he had of being selected, let's put it that way. And we also have a category for players who are injured but not strong candidates. We don't have, I think we have one in that category. Just let me get it ready here, and that is Kaveh Reze was in that category, a fractured fibula, and he may have recovered from that and just not been selected, because I just noticed at the very end there that he had been injured the last time we did the podcast. Anyway, not a strong candidate. All right, well, now it falls on us to go through the squad again and select who we think are going to be starters. So I'm just erasing the those who made the squad, and let's go to, Carlos Queiroz, the manager. We'll call him a de facto starter. Let's go to the goalkeeper. So I'll list the names and then I'll give a brief comment on who we think is going to start. So we have Ali Reza Beranvand and Amir Abedzadeh, and we have Hosseini and Payam Niazmand as the keepers who are brought to the cup. And on paper, it looks like it could be Beranvand or Abedzadeh, or perhaps the two alternating, because they've played a fairly equal number of games. However, our feeling is that, and it is feeling more than rational logic, the incumbent Beranvand was more likely to start, and that's what we said in the previous podcast, and we'll stick to that here. But I wouldn't be surprised if that turns out not to be true, and maybe they share the position. Okay, central defenders. The candidates are Shoza Khalilzadeh, Majid Hosseini, Hossein Kanani, and Morteza Poraliganji there. And at the end of the full-length podcast, we had felt fairly sure that Kanani and Khalilzadeh would be the starters because they started most of the World Cup games. However, since the friendlies in June, it's really been a mishmash, with Hosseini actually starting more than any of the others. Not that he started a lot himself, but just slightly more than the others. So I got to say, we really have no idea who they're going to choose as central defenders in this case. So obviously it'll be two of the four of them, because they always go with two central defenders. But we've kind of lost sight of the starters there. Kanani and Khalilzadeh didn't really start that much in the friendlies. So again, and then in that November game, we kind of expected to see who the starters would be, and they went with an experimental squad. So I'm just going to wait and see. Maybe they'll have to work it out in the cup there. Okay, left backs, we have Omid Nurafkam and Ehsan Haji Safi and Milad Mohammadi and Abul Fazl Jalali. The reason they have four left backs there, especially Haji Safi, plays elsewhere on the field. He's just kind of coded as a left back, but that's just one of the positions he plays. And he did play it during this period. So at the end of the last podcast, we had put Mohammadi and Haji Safi as a rotating, or either one of them starting, but we weren't sure which. Now it seems more like Jalali and Haji Safi, Jalali starting some of the friendlies, but again, we don't know exactly what that means, so it's a wait and see. However, we do note that Haji Safi plays in other positions, so we still see him as a sometimes starter on the field. He doesn't always start, but we think that he will sometimes start somewhere on the field, maybe as left back or maybe elsewhere. At the right back position, at the end of the candidates are Sadegh Moharami, and we were surprised that Saleh Hardani didn't make the squad, and it seemed instead of him, Ramin Rezaeian was brought back to the squad. Well, on this side, it's a little more clear. We see Moharami as the starter. We did last time, and we kind of we were reaffirmed by that because he wasn't called up to the November friendly, but that didn't shake our confidence that he's going to be a starter, especially after we saw he was selected for the squad too. Okay, moving on, we have defensive midfielder Saeed Ezzatullahi and Milad Sarlak. No, Sarlak didn't make the squad. I think I forgot to erase him. And Omid Ibrahimi didn't make the squad either. So we just have Saeed Ezzatullahi and returning to the squad, Ruzbeh Cheshmi. And then central midfielders, we have Ahmad Nurulahi and Karim Ali Karimi. Wow, these Iranian names are getting the better of me here. Okay, so at the end of the full-length podcast, we saw Ezatolahi and Nurolahi as the starters, and we did see Sarlak moving into a starting position more and more. So we coded him as a sometimes starter. So we're going to stick with Ezatolahi and Nurolahi as starters here. But obviously we were wrong about Sarlak because he didn't make the squad. So actually we did kind of regret naming. I guess this may be sour grapes, but it's not really. When I took a closer look at his participation, trying to understand why he wasn't selected, I realized he wasn't really starting as much as we had credited him, and we probably shouldn't have named him as a potential starter. Anyway, or we just made a mistake. I'm happy to admit that too. Let's move on to left midfielders and right midfielders. We didn't have candidates there, so let's move on to left winger / attacking midfielder, and we have Mehdi Taremi here. So actually Taremi didn't play here much as a left winger or left attacking midfielder. During this period he played more as a forward. He is a definite starter regardless though. In terms of the position of left wing and left attacking midfielder, it seems like the manager didn't like the combination of Amiri or Jahan Baksh. So those were the two during World Cup qualifying, but they haven't shown up there during the friendlies. So he was experimenting with others during the friendlies. So really we'll have to wait and see who fills in this position. But as far as players go, we think Mehdi Taremi will definitely show up on the field somewhere. It would be kind of shocking if he didn't, but maybe not as shocking as some might think, which I'll get to in a second. Over to the right wing, in terms of position, Golizadeh and Jahan Baksh seem to share the position, but that's become a bit less certain under the new manager, so we will kind of have to see, but I do think it'll remain the same in that case. In terms of the players, though, we do see both of them as starters because they both have started in other positions as well as the right wing. So that's not the only position available to them. So we think both of them will be starters here. Okay, moving on to attacking midfielders. We had Vahid Amiri as a starter in that podcast. In the previous mediacast, we said if he's fit. Well, it turns out he is fit. And so now we're going to more confidently code him as a starter. We had Godos as a sometimes starter, but we kind of reviewed that and thought he didn't have enough starts to really merit that. For example, he only started one of the 4 friendlies. So we've kind of changed our mind on Saman Godos as a starter. And in the forward line, of course, a lot comes down to Sardar Azmoun. Sardar Azmoun's injury, but of course he will be a starter. Now I said I'd come back to Mehdi Taremi. You may be surprised to know that both of them only start about 2/3 of the time. So they're not as guaranteed as they probably seem in the minds. Like, who would think that they would leave Azmoun or Taremi on the bench? Well, they do. They do sometimes. Now, maybe it is for less important games or something like that, but I was surprised by that. Anyway, so, well, Azmoun was going to be a starter if he's fit, but the problem is he's an injury doubt, so I'll kind of indicate that here with a purple there. And Kareem Ansarifard, well, if Azmoun is not able to play, Ansarifard might start, but he seems to have carved out a position for himself as a super substitute, coming on late and scoring his goals there. So he's not really a starter. I think he did start the November or one of the September friendlies, but it doesn't happen that much. And of course, on the forward line, we have Taremi, who will likely be a starter even if Azmoun is there. will likely be a starting forward. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the predictions there, and we'll just finish with some closing thoughts. And rather than kind of rediscuss everything we discussed in the team podcast about Iran's prospect, we're answering specifically this question: does the selection change our opinion about their chances? And I'm going to say it slightly does change things for me. As I mentioned, I had an Iranian student in one of my classes. Had a really good conversation with him. I was really impressed with how knowledgeable he was about Iran. And he was going back to 2006. Telling me what a great team Iran had going into 2006, but then injuries really prevented them from showing what they had, from doing as well as they thought they could do, prevented their hopes from coming to fruition. So he was nervous about injuries for this cup too. And at that time when we were talking, Amiri Hosseini and Khalilzadeh were all injury doubts, and now they have Azmoun's injury to worry about. My concern is not so much the injury situation, it's the changes that I've seen under the returning manager. So a lot of positions seem kind of in flux right now, and it almost seems too late to do what they need to do to kind of settle the squad. I was really expecting in the November friendly that they would put out, and even to a degree in the September friendlies, kind of put out their starters and get them used to playing with each other. And to my surprise, the November game was highly experimental. In Iran's favor, though, is the maturity of their squad, so they may be able to overcome that, as well as the fact that he was their manager even through the 2018 World Cup. So it may be kind of back to familiarity for the Iranian squad, as far as I know. So however, the instability I saw does make me worry a little bit about Iran and maybe eroding their chances a little bit here. So I still give them a decent chance of passing this group. In fact, I think they have a fairly equal chance as USA and Wales. That's my feeling on it right now. And I really hope the injury to Azmoun doesn't turn out to be like 2006. And I really hope the disorganization that I perceive under the new manager is not the way it seems to me, and doesn't get in the way of their prospects. So good luck to Iran. All right, that brings us to the end of the podcast. So keep in mind, we may be editing together a list of the bios of the 26 final candidates. So rather than being a new podcast, that'll be just kind of chopping and editing together the previous podcast which we did with just the 26 starters. I'm kind of doing that for myself because I would like to listen to that as I prepare to go watch a team. Meanwhile, keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And our website. I forgot to show the picture again. Our website there at the bottom of the picture for you YouTube watchers at soccerphiles.captivate.fm. And check the show notes too for links to our website. And you'll find the previous podcast, like the full-length version that I've been mentioning in this podcast. All right. Well, I hope you join us in our next team update, and see you next time.